it's definitely one of those things that's not a one size fits all approach. And I think that's probably what's one of those things that kind of differentiates good service with that hospitality is kind of reading the game and looking after someone as you would if, they were in your home or they were a friend of yours.
Hi, everybody. You're with Dani Valent and you're listening to Dirty Linen. Super grateful for your company wherever I may find you. Maybe you're walking the dog, maybe you're doing the dishes, maybe you're prepping in the kitchen, maybe you're in the car, who knows? But whatever you're doing, I hope you are having a good day or looking forward to a good day. I know that I am always in my happy place when I am ready to do one of these podcasts. Now, we talk about food on this podcast. We talk about restaurants and hospitality, gathering around good things to eat and drink. I think it's so important when we do that we not only think about the food and the people that cook it, but the people that bring it to us, the people that look after us and really deliver the hospitality that, in my opinion, is what makes, which really clinches the deal at a restaurant. If it doesn't feel right, then it's not right. So I'm always looking for ways to celebrate great service and front of house skills, experience, commitment, and passion. We're definitely going to do that today. The time is coming nigh for applications to close for the Katie McCormack Young Service Talent Award for the Age Good Food Guide. So in my home state of Victoria, this is the third year that this really important prize is running, celebrating young service talent with a $10,000 prize and mentoring for service professionals aged under 30. So we'll put a link to the application in the show notes. If you think you might be this person or you might know this person, please check it out, encourage them to apply. Today, we are speaking to last year's winner. Georgia Limacher is now working at Yiaga. Beautiful restaurant. Can't wait for my next visit there. And we're going to talk all things service today. Georgia, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Very excited to be here.
Really excited to have you on the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and, about your role at Yiaga. Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. So I am from Wellington in New Zealand originally. I suppose spent a lot of time growing up in my family's restaurant there called Ortega. And I think from a very young age, fell in love with the industry and everything about it, I think. But I moved over to this amazing city about 3.5 years ago. So I suppose spent the last 2.5 years at Gimlet and then started at Yiaga earlier this year. So, I'm very lucky and privileged to be spending some amazing time and some great restaurants.
You have an interesting path. I think so many people that end up working in restaurants, that their story is, they fell into it. They were doing it while they thought they were, focusing on something else, and then it sort of hooked them in. But you're different. You grew up in restaurants. What was what place did hospitality have in your family?
I think it's the whole place. I think everything about it. I'm the youngest of 4 girls and we've all spent our time, in the restaurants and the space. And I think food and dining and hospitality and looking after people is really, I suppose, kind of one of the key pillars of, what we do. But in saying that as well, I suppose, we very much grew up in that space and with that ethos. But still then I think there was part of, my parents that almost discouraged us a little bit from, I suppose wanting to keep our options open and not always just focusing on that. So I think, there's so much value in the skills that you learn in these spaces, but you can take that in so many different roles, I think. So I did go to university and have got a degree and went for a little time in the corporate world. And then after a while, I was like, okay, perfect. This has really shown me how much I love hospitality.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. What were some of your early experiences in the family restaurant?
I think I did my first shift. I think I was 13, and yeah, we have all these fun leather aprons that everyone wears. So I remember having to, put another notch in the apron belt because I was by far the smallest one there. But I think straight away, I loved it. Like to be spending my Friday, Saturday nights as a 13-year-old or as a teenager in that space rather than hanging out with my friends. But I think that very quickly became kind of my family and my group. And I just loved it. I remember I think it's got a real pull and it's a bit of an addiction. And I love that pace and the energy, and that particular space is a really fun one to be in. So I loved it.
What was it that drew you to Australia? I mean, you can have a hospitality career in New Zealand, but was there something that you felt you weren't getting?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think Melbourne was always a city that I love to visit and dine at, and I think it was just that feeling again of being a small fish in a big pond. Yeah, I think New Zealand's got some amazing restaurants, and there's lots of opportunity there. But I think for me, just to get I suppose cross paths with some people with amazing experience and just be in those bigger restaurants that really, a lot of them, on the scale and size, they don't exist in a, smaller city.
Do you think that the arrival of the Michelin Guide to New Zealand will make a difference to people, young professionals such as yourself looking to create a career in hospitality? Do you think the possibility of working in restaurants that have been anointed by Michelin will make a difference?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think, of course, time will tell, but I think already from what I've heard, I think it's one of those things that's kind of a, universal, guide for people all around the world. And I think, countries or cities have their own guides, which I think is super, super valuable. But I think for the fact that it's universal and you'll get people from Europe who have maybe been, grew up or trained in Michelin restaurants, I think it kind of puts it more on a bit more of a draw card. So I think there's that opportunity for sure. And from what I've already heard, those awards were, probably less than a month ago now in New Zealand. And it's already, they feel the impact of it in terms of people, even locals, that have been up the road from the restaurant for 15 years. And they're like, oh, I'll try it now. It's got a Michelin star, which is I think it's funny, but there is definitely a draw for it for sure.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely keeping a close watch on this space because I think, one of the big questions around it is there value in it? The government's paid money for Michelin to be there. Is it going to pay off? So that's actually so interesting to identify the domestic impact. It's not just about internationals deciding to book a trip to New Zealand. Yeah, that's
for sure. And I think as well, it's one of those things that it does grab people's attention. And I think even people that may not be super interested in restaurants or awards or dining, everyone knows Michelin. So I think in that way, it does give it some kind of, status for people wanting to work there or, yeah, it'll be interesting for sure.
Yeah, super interesting that in a way, it's this prestigious guide. It's like the least democratic thing ever, but the fact that it sort of explodes out of the food world into the broader media and awareness landscape means that it will perhaps, hook in people who aren't, close watchers of the restaurant scene. That's so interesting, Georgia.
Yeah, for sure. I think it, expands it to a broader audience. So it'll be interesting.
So I'd love to talk to you about the art of service. There are obviously, hard skills involved in delivering food and wine to tables and clearing plates and all that, that sort of obvious architecture of a restaurant experience. But I'd love to talk more about the other stuff. Like, tell me about, what you see as some of the pillars of the service that you would like to deliver.
It's an interesting one and one that I love. I suppose I think the kind of key thing and the deeply human thing of front of house and of, that really kind of lovely, memorable hospitality would be having that connection with people. And I think that, can often sound cliche, but it really is, what I think is super important. I think, people in a way can go out and eat, or they can eat at home. But I think why people go out and want to seek certain experiences rather than just a meal is to have that connection with people and, feel seen and at ease and looked after. I think being really well looked after is one of the best feelings in the whole world, whether you're at, someone's house for Christmas or at a fine dining restaurant or at the pub. I think it's all about that.
So how do you do it? Like, how do you create that connection? How do you know what people need in that moment? Like, how do you know how they want to be seen?
Yeah, I think you've got to really approach every person and every table with a really open mind and, see. It's definitely one of those things that's not a one size fits all approach. And I think that's probably what's one of those things that kind of differentiates good service with that hospitality is kind of reading the game and, looking to build that rapport as you would with, someone that's a friend or, anyone is trying to see what they're seeking from the experience, what they enjoy, what's going to, the best thing they could possibly have to make them feel, happy and looked after and at ease. So I think it's a funny one to put into words because it is so intangible, But yeah, I really think it's that, looking after someone as you would if, they were in your home or they were a friend of yours.
How does it differ from workplace to workplace? If I think about Gimlet, where you were previously, it's like a huge machine of a restaurant with people coming and going at all times. The tables can be very different sizes. People might be there for, I don't know, like to show off, to celebrate, to give themselves a little dose of luxury. They might be there at 10 p.m. for flambéed pancakes. There's such a range of experiences and such a large number of people the room is so different. They could be sitting at the bar, they could be by the window, they could be cozy up the back. And then if I think about your current workplace, Yiaga, it's a restaurant where people are there for a particular experience. It's a set menu. Everyone is everyone is having a similar experience. Of course, it's different from table to table, but it's much smaller. It's 30-something seats and a much smaller team. Like, are you the same, Georgia, in those restaurants?
I think that's a great question and I love it. I think it's all part of the fun for both. And I think both restaurants are so fun in that way, how different they are. Because I think at somewhere like Gimlet, your time with, a certain table, it may be more limited and there's obviously, a lot of people in the space. But I think, that is all part of the fun is, making sure that any interaction you do have is, meaningful and intentional and great. And I think in both spaces, there is, you're also backed by amazing teams with this real depth of expertise and knowledge, and you can lean on different people for different things. So I think at Gimlet's, it's all about, you may be stretched a little thinner, but in terms of every interaction you have, people go there because it's a fun place to be, and it's, it really is a consuming place as both a guest, I think, and an employee in terms of it being, loud and bustling and fun. So I think in that way, you can still every interaction you have really take care of people. And then I think Yiaga is really interesting as well because it's the first space I've been in that where most guests are spending a minimum of 3 hours in the seat. And that's a really long time and a really intimate time to, build up that rapport and spend a lot of time with people. So in that way, it can be a little bit more of a slow burn in terms of, making the whole rounded experience. But in both, you can definitely, have it in both ways. And I think in terms of you saying the same, Georgia, I would say so, I mean, I think it's all in terms of, delivery. I don't like, taking my stuff too seriously with things. And hopefully in both ways, I can be approachable with, information. And, I think my intentions at both places very much remain the same, which is having people, have a good time and yeah.
How much do you prepare? Like, how much do you know about customers before you look after them?
I mean, I think we do in both spaces as best we can, I know, but you really, if it's the first time you're meeting someone, it's the first time you're meeting someone, and you've got to play, do that dance, I think. So I think in that way, I suppose you can prepare with some information, but whether you're, reading a little bit of information and then meeting someone for the first time and building that connection yourself, it's quite a different thing. So I think you can build on some of that and use it as a tool. But yeah, once you're face to face, it's all on, I think.
Tell me about a time when it just feels perfect, like so beautiful, so energizing for yourself, and yeah, you can tell that the person's having a great time. Can you think of any experiences, any stories you can share?
Yeah, I think one in particular that I think is really a special story to me would have been quite recently. We had this lovely table in at Yiaga, and they were awesome. I think there was a table of three, and two of them had travelled. They'd all travelled from interstate to have lunch, and we had a great time together all day long. Good banter, and they had the best time, and we were. Yeah, it was just lovely. And then towards the end of the meal, they were like, "Oh, so you're a Kiwi?" And I said, "Yeah, yeah." They said, "Where are you from?" And I said, "Oh, I'm from Wellington." And they go, "Oh my God, Wellington, have you ever heard of a restaurant called Ortega? It's our favorite restaurant in the world. It's made us feel, we tell all our friends to go there. We probably went 6 years ago for the first time, but it was so special, and the space is fun, and we go feel so well looked after. And it's one of our favorite places in the world." And they go, "Do you know it?" And I had like tears in my eyes. It was just this beautiful full circle moment. And I was like, "Yeah, that's my family's restaurant." And they were like, "No way." It was just beautiful that it was like, obviously, we kind of build that rapport, and you've got this one connection, then it all makes the world feel so small all of a sudden. And then I sent that little story to a voicemail back to Wellington, and they all played it to the staff, and all the chefs had tears in their eyes. And I think it was just one of those really special moments. And I think, of course, in the restaurants, those moments where you have, a great time with tables, it's, awesome. And it happens, generally lucky to have it quite frequently, it's exciting, and, people are happy to be there. So yeah, very lucky.
I love it. So beautiful. I've got tears in my eyes as well. Uh, what about something not so fun, Georgia? Like, have you ever had an experience where it's super awkward or it all goes wrong?
Oh, I think surely, yeah, of course. You got to take the good with the bad. I think, there's not one, I suppose, that springs to mind particularly, but those are the ones that really eat me up, And I think it used to affect me a lot when, you can get 100 great reviews and then you get one and you're like, I dropped the ball, or whatever happens, everyone's human. And I think that's what it all comes back to, is that it's a human game. And mistakes can happen. And I think that's so disappointing, because I think, especially when you're working in great places, that hold yourself and your team to a certain standard. So I think those happen. I don't think there's one I could talk to straight away in detail. But, you learn from it and identify maybe what happened and how you dropped the ball, and then, work on that for next time. But of course, yeah, those moments happen. Hopefully I've learned from some of them.
Oh, honestly, I think stuff happens, but I think the way that people and businesses recover from, I don't know, whether it's a mistake or, I don't know, something clunky that happened, that's the tell. I think, as you say, everyone's human and not everything goes right all the time. But I often find I learn so much about a business by the way a mistake is handled. And it often endears you to the restaurant, to the people, if whatever happened is, taken on, it's noted, it's remedied, or, even just it could just be with a word, or a gesture. Like, that is actually the power where I suppose that vulnerability creates sometimes an even deeper human connection.
I think that is 100% true. And I think there's those moments absolutely where a mistake's happened and everyone knows it's happened, everyone's aware of it. And then exactly the way you handle it can help actually make the whole situation a really good one, and, build that trust even further. Things happen. But yeah, I completely agree with you.
Georgia, I'd love you to talk about your application for the Young Service Talent Award. What made you enter the award for the first time?
Yeah. I suppose it was, I mean, obviously it's such an exciting opportunity. I think alone, the team behind it, Hannah, I was actually really lucky to cross paths with in the first 2 weeks I ever arrived in Melbourne, which I was really lucky with. Um, and I suppose, having that team behind it was really exciting opportunity. And I think, in terms of the application process, I think I was obviously drawn to it. I'm always very keen to, keep moving forward and keep learning. And I think a big part of that is obviously, seeking out these kind of opportunities and also the opportunity to connect with some of these amazing people. So I think that was really what drew me to it to begin with.
So you mentioned Hannah. We should say that the award is named after the late Katie McCormack, who was a really just a beautiful figure in Melbourne hospitality. She had the restaurants Congress, Lagotto, and Merrickett. She very sadly died, and the award has been named in her honour as an initiative by Bronwyn Cabord, who's at De Fermier, and Hannah Green, who's at Etta, and Daphne. Such a lovely initiative, and such a vote of confidence in the hospitality industry broadly, but in the importance of service and front of house more generally. So it's a really something that, as someone who's written for the Good Food Guide for a long time, I'm super proud to have any association with. And it's good on you, Georgia, for going for it. I mentioned that you applied for it the first time, but you weren't successful on your first round. You went back again. Like, what made you reapply, and what had changed for you over the year that you think meant that you clinched it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. I think there was, after being unsuccessful the first time, I think there was never a doubt in my mind that I'd give it another go. I think what I think about the application process that I found really valuable both times, and something that I've been thinking about, is that in this industry, or I think maybe at most, it's not often that you sit down and you spend time asking yourself and reflecting, why do I do what I do? And why do I love what I do? And what do I think is important about what I do, And I think in that it was, even just taking the time to sit there and think about those questions the first time, you can distill down a lot of, your philosophy, I suppose, on paper and be like, oh yeah, okay, it's almost like reinvigorating. And then I think the second time around, I think there was a lot of, growth in that year in terms of, continuing to challenge myself and just have a little bit more experience, both in the city and in the restaurant and in the space. And I suppose I was maybe 1 year, further down my track of having a little bit more of a vision in terms of what I want the next 5, 10, 15 years of my career to look like. And I think that was very much distilled into, okay, I love this industry and I'm really passionate about it, and I would love to share that with as many people as possible and help drive that, passion for others. I think, both guests, but really about, colleagues and future employees, So I think that was really what excited me. And I think that it took me a year to kind of be like, okay, that's what I would love to create. And I think that was what was communicated.
And so what was it like to win the award?
It was crazy. I'm honestly just, super humbling, wild, honestly. It was really exciting. What a privilege, of course. Yeah, I wasn't lucky enough to meet Katie, but I think in terms of everything that I heard, she really embodied, everything that I think's really, special and important about hospitality. So I think that it was just an amazing honor, and it was, what an exciting opportunity. Yeah, it was amazing.
And the cash prize, like, have you used that for something specific, or is it squirreled away for a particular purpose?
Yeah, it is. It's squirreled away for this year. So I suppose the award, I suppose, brings opportunity in kind of two ways. Of course, there's the cash prize, which, yes, is squirreled away for, I believe, a trip to Europe next year, where I really hope to spend some time doing vintage in a winery and, spending some time in restaurants that I think, will, help continue to distill my vision and, gain more experiences. But I really think kind of the other huge key part of it is that amazing opportunity for mentorship. And I think even the application process, you do get that, and you get to meet the amazing people, Chris Young, Bronwyn, Seb, Crowther, and Hannah. It's a pretty strong lineup of people. But I think in terms of, that as well, they all are available to you, what a lineup of people in terms of such a depth of experience and knowledge. And then, of course, they set you up. They give you the opportunity to set you up with a dream mentor. So I have spent last weekend actually with the amazing Ainsley Lubbock down at Point Leo Estate in Mornington. And what a dream. Honestly, I think it really has been super special. I've spent time with a lot of those people individually. And I think that alone has really been so rich for me, because I think it's really shown that nothing is linear, and all parts of the journey really add to, all the experience. I think, they all have such different backgrounds. They've all done this, some of them have been business owners and then move into different roles. And so I think that's really kind of given me confidence in where I'm going and stressing out a bit less, everything's part of the journey. And if you can cross paths with as many amazing people, it's all going to add to it.
Oh, Georgia, so beautifully said. And let's talk a bit more about Ainsley. So Ainsley Lubbock, a veteran of hospitality. I've encountered her at numerous restaurants. But yes, the last time I walked into Point Leo Estate down on the Mornington Peninsula, she just materialised. It feels like she has, I don't know, 360-degree vision in many dimensions. So she has this extraordinary ability to see everything that's going on in that quite an enormous space, but not only to see it, but to feel it, to sense it, to know what's needed next, to amplify the experience for a diner in whichever way that they could imagine or never imagine. I mean, so yeah, she's just an extraordinary professional. And yeah, even just thinking about her, I just feel suffused with warmth and safety. But tell us.
I was not to say, even just thinking about it makes me smile. What a nice lady.
Just what a consummate professional. Anyway, so I mean, okay, so we love her, but what can you learn from someone? I mean, you've spoken a little bit about the sort of intangibility of some of the things that you can deliver in a room, in time and space. Like, how do you learn from someone about that stuff?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think so. I first came across, first met Ainsley when we went to Point Leo a couple of years ago, me and my partner, Taylor. And we went there, and it was funny. We had been saving for a house and we had like no money, but we were like, okay, we're going to go out for a nice lunch. And, obviously you spend a bit of money. And we were staying at a like free campground down the road after spending, hundreds and hundreds of dollars at lunch. But we went there with a really, open mind. We were really excited to dine there. And Ainsley it's the first time I'd met her. And I was just like blown away. And it was one of those experiences that has stayed with me and will always stay with me in terms of one of those really special moments in hospitality. I think just her warmth, the way she carries herself. Like every time one of us would be away from the table, you'd come back and she's like deep in conversation with the other person. So I think in that way, that's what really drew me to her as a mentor. But in saying that, everyone is always going to have their different styles on the floor, and the way that you connect with people is different. And that's not necessarily you can get someone to write down and you copy, But I think in that way, I really wanted to, have a bit of an idea or see her in action in terms of how she kind of carries herself, I suppose, or, leads a team. She's got all these amazing people that she's worked with for years. And everyone I've ever spoken to with her or to, sorry, everyone I've ever spoken to in the industry about her, she is the exact same sentiment in terms of what an amazing, leader and key person. So I think just kind of, I was just hoping to go down there and have some of that rub off. But I think, yeah, just seeing, I suppose, how she leads people with such grace and how does she kind of juggles it all. And also to see, I mean, as you said, she's been in so many different roles and so many amazing roles, and how that kind of led her to where she is now, and how it all kind of adds to the beautiful, quilt of who she is.
Georgia, you're also a qualified sommelier, and you speak in your application, which I've had the privilege of reading, about that journey and your pride in that accomplishment. I'd love you to talk about the place of wine and beverages in general in hospitality these days. People are drinking less. They're being pretty careful with their money in many cases. There's a lot of people are easily intimidated by wine talk. How do you tackle that as part of the service experience that you deliver?
Yeah, I think again, great question. I think that intimidation is something that I really love to focus on and overcome. Because I think, again, I was lucky to grow up. My brother-in-law, who'd pretty much taught me a lot of what I knew from a very early age, is such an amazing person who talks about wine. And he is so humble. He would never, say that he's I don't think he'd ever even used the word sommelier, but his wine knowledge has been some of the most, in-depth and amazing. And the way he always talked about, it was quite a producer-led conversation and none of the, I suppose, technical detail, which I think is all important. But the way he was able to communicate it was always so humble and just really palatable, I think. And even, I suppose, going through all the process or learning about wine for me is super intimidating, I think. And I completely empathize that it's like you're never going to know everything. And it's one of those, industries where maybe traditionally has been quite, hard to crack through. So I think the kind of key thing now is trying to make it as approachable as possible. I don't know, it doesn't need to be scary, and it's not a test. And the whole point at the end of the day for me is that you've got something in your glass that you're enjoying drinking and you're, having fun with all your friends or your family around, a table. So I think in that way, making, wine not feel so intimidating and just have it be with a bit of a softer touch and all about, enjoying it is huge. But no, I understand. I think it's an interesting one to tackle, I think.
It is interesting. And, price is another one. How do you feel about a table who comes in and says, oh, we want a bottle of wine, but we only want to spend X amount of dollars?
I love it. I think that is it's some of the most helpful information out there, and that's fine. I think every occasion, everything calls for a different, price, bottle, experience. And I think one of my favorite things out there is, a lot of, sometimes we can't always afford to drink nice bottles of white Burgundy or Chablis, but finding those little pockets around the world that deliver amazing value or producers that are doing really cool stuff that don't come, you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on bottle. I think that's some of the gold in terms of what we can do, is bringing these new grapes to people and educating in that way. And I think that's what makes it fun and enticing and and interesting rather than intimidating, I think.
Georgia, I'd love you to talk about a meal that you've just loved, like whether it was the food, the service, the setting, what you learnt, how you felt. Like, can you just take us to a perfect moment in your life?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's plenty to choose from. But I think when I was 18, I went on my first trip to Europe with my parents. And I'm not meaning to say in any way that, these to have an amazing experience, it needs to be a 3 Michelin star restaurant. But this one happened to be, because I think it was quite, I don't know, defining in a way for me, that we were staying in this little village in Burgundy, and we went to this 3 Michelin star restaurant called Limacher. My first experience in that. And I was obviously already sitting there like blown away. And I think the key thing for me is that whenever I grew up in the restaurant, I could never drink, obviously, because I was under 18. And so, I always tried my best to learn the wines by the glass, by the notes and things. But there's only, you really have to try it and get to know it. But the one thing that I focused on was cheese, because I could eat cheese at any age, And then so I remember being at this restaurant, and the whole experience was amazing. But they had kind of picked up that I was a bit of a cheese fan at the end. And they brought out, of course, you can imagine, in the middle of Burgundy, this beautiful cheese trolley. And I actually my parents just burst out laughing because I had this single tear fall down my face. And they talked to me all about every cheese. And I think that particular experience showed me how, important that product knowledge aspect is in terms of being able to maybe cater people's experiences or really kind of delve in on what people are passionate about. But I'll never forget it. I was just blown away, and it was awesome. And I think, just lucky to have had so many amazing experiences with amazing hospitality. But that one sticks to me. I think it's, it was awesome.
A real benchmark, and what a good lesson in, having the knowledge ready to go. You don't need to dispense every morsel of information to every table, but that you have it at your disposal when the moment requires it. How powerful is that? That is, really great.
For sure. And I think there's almost nothing worse than going out and you might not care particularly about something and someone wants to tell you all about it. So I think having, he read the game for sure. Picked me out.
Reading the cheese game, always good. Georgia, let's finish just with a bit of cheerleading for the award. So someone might be listening to this and they think, it sounds amazing, but I don't think it's me. I wouldn't be able to. It's not me. I couldn't do that. What are the advantages of even applying for the Young Service Talent Award?
Honestly, there's nothing to lose. I think everything to gain from this particular opportunity, whether it's be even, sitting there and answering the questions or reflecting, as I said before. I think if you're really passionate about what you're doing in this industry, for me alone, that was really, it was a really, useful tool to kind of distill down and kind of just take a bit of a, breather and see where I was at. I think, just nothing to lose. Obviously you get to meet these amazing people. You put yourself out there. And of course, these things, they can be scary, sitting down and having a conversation or an interview with people. Of course, it's nerve-wracking, but that's all kind of amazing experience to take on and skills that you'll take on wherever you are. And then, of course, the opportunity to then receive mentorship and also some cash to go and, live the dream and do, continue your career. What an amazing opportunity that doesn't come around. So honestly, I would very much encourage anyone to, for sure, give it a go. I think I'm only, at the very beginning of bearing the fruits of the process. So I'm, super, super lucky and would absolutely recommend going for it. How exciting.
Well, the scary things are so often the good things. Yeah. And, you're getting the benefit, but we're all getting the benefit because we get to be looked after you in restaurants. You get to train other people the benefits just continue to flow. Georgia, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I feel like I need to have a cheese plate in the next few hours to just really round off this conversation with a very lactic experience. But thanks so much. Thanks so much for this beautiful conversation.
I'm so glad our conversation left you feeling that way. Amazing. Thank you so much. Amazing. Lovely to speak with you. How exciting.
This is Dirty Linen. I'm Dani Valent. We bring you untold stories from the food world. Real, raw, unafraid, hopeful. We're driven by a belief that food provides endless opportunities for learning, connecting, and creating the world we want to live in. Delicious, open-hearted, meaningful. If you know a story that needs telling, get in touch. Write to dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thank you for listening.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.